Welcome to the Nuclear Snail channel. In this episode, I'm going to talk about memorability of your costumes. How to make people actually remember your costumes and props and characters. So we will go through some pictures, both from myself and especially from everyone in the community, or at least from a lot of people in the community, because I can't show as many pictures as have been submitted to me. But I have a lot of examples from other people than myself. We will talk about why you want to make your costumes memorable, in which situations you do not want your costumes to be memorable, and what memorability actually consists of or how it is constituted. A small disclaimer before we start. For all the submitted community photos, I've tried to track down all the photographers. Sometimes it says who the photographer is right here, for example, in the picture. For the others, I've asked who made the photo and knew. For example, here, Faith Roswell is the model, Thomas Sprenger is the photographer. If you're one of the photographers and I couldn't track you down, didn't mention you, sorry, I tried. So, I'm all about crediting other people's work, but in this one you see it's really many pictures. And that's also the reason why I'm not crediting literally anyone in the video description, because then I would be sitting on that longer than I sit on making the video itself. But I will read the names of the crafter and the photographer aloud. Again, if I mix something up or couldn't track you down, it's not out of malice. I respect everyone's artistic work, and thanks to everyone so much for sending in all of those submissions. Alright, so let's start with the definitions of memorability and what it is, what it isn't, when and why do you want it. So memorability and characterization, the things we're talking about here, are not the same as overall quality. Get your terminology straight. That's the point number one. So when I say memorable, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's just good from every angle, you know. It can be horribly executed, but still memorable. And just being memorable doesn't automatically make it good and vice versa. However, memorability constitutes a lot of good costumes in those situations where it is desired. So memorability is often, but not always, desired. When is it not desired? When would you not want your costume to stand out and be remembered by people? Well, for example, in armies, if we think about war boys and the Immortan Joe, sure, the design of the war boy itself stands out, but each single war boy, each one of them is just like the other. And then we have the boss, Immortan Joe, who stands out. So the same applies to NPCs on LARP. You have an army of NPCs, and they might look all kind of the same, but then you have their leader, who is an officer and stands out, for example, like this. Let's go to the definition of memorability that I came up, or the definition of what is memorable. So this is where it gets really interesting. There it is. I'll show you some pretty picture in the background to look so you're not bored listening to this pseudoscience talk. But believe me, this episode will make you a lot better. So memorable is an accomplishment that stands out in its time. I'll say it again. Memorable is an accomplishment that stands out in its time. So it's an accomplishment, so you have to do something. You have to accomplish something. We will get to that just in the next line. And it has to stand out, so be different, better than the other accomplishments that are competing with your work in its time. Because if there is one constant thing, it is the fact that times always change and works and art styles always develop. That is the one constant thing about time, that it's always changing. So something that was great a long time ago and would stand out, for example, this is one of my first works, it would stand out in certain regards even nowadays, but in other regards not. In which it would and it wouldn't, let's get to that. So here are the types of accomplishment, and I promise you I'm going to show you more pretty pictures real soon. We just need to get through this line first, okay? So types of accomplishment. Number one is raw effort. So a raw effort accomplishment, if it's basically just when someone is looking at your work and is like, whoa, that must have taken you a lot of effort to create this. For example, if someone creates a chainmail, that is a lot of raw effort. To create a chainmail, that takes so much time and energy, and it's just, I don't know how people do it. it takes a lot of raw effort. So that is an accomplishment that generates respect. That guy or girl or whatever has put a lot of effort in their costume. The next one is technical. It is different from the raw effort accomplishment in the terms that if it's a technical accomplishment, let's take this one for example. This is actually a good one. This big cannon right here. Not everyone can assemble it like this technically and also aesthetically. So aesthetics is actually the next part. But let's stay with the technical part, like how hard it is to make something. Now, making a chainmail is not that difficult, it just takes a lot of effort. But it's rather easy to learn it at first compared to other things. Technical accomplishment, for example, this Gauss rifle right here, not everyone can do it. So that's why it stands out. And we will get to other examples than my own quite soon when I'm done with the accomplishment types. So, for example, this jacket right here, making that, like distressing that a bit, it's not a lot of effort and it's technically not difficult. Anyone can do distressing, really. Making a Gauss rifle like this, it's a technical accomplishment because not everyone can assemble things like this, be it a prop or be it a costume. So that's when people go like, wow, you really know your handicrafting, right? So you have the technical means, the skills, the tools, the everything, the experience to assemble it technically. The next is aesthetic accomplishment. It doesn't need to have a lot of raw effort or technical skill to create something that is aesthetically pleasing to the eye. And aesthetic accomplishment is something that, for example, here, it is a well-balanced piece right here. And you see all those, design language things. I've talked about this costume in the past, so it's just really nicely balanced out. There is not a lot of handicrafting going on here. There is not a lot of raw effort. I've just clobbered this together in a day. And there is also not a lot of technical skill going on here because this is just held together by duct tape. But it excels in the terms of aesthetic accomplishment. It's just a visually nicely balanced, pleasing to the eye thing. So aesthetic accomplishment is just how pretty does it look. Also, the last one, well, not the last one, but almost last one, conceptual accomplishment with a focus on novelty and rarity. That is basically the question of all of those points I named before, regardless, how new to the eye of the beholder is this and how rare is this? So let's say I would be the only one making a metal armor that you see on the screen right now, while everyone else makes armor out of tire. I'm gonna stand out. It's rare, so it's a rarity conceptual decision and accomplishment, and it is also new because everyone has been doing tire armor for ages and this one guy does it from metal. It's obviously not the case. I'm just naming a fictional example here because I'm looking at metal armor right now. So that would be a conceptual accomplishment. That's when the concept of your work, the idea of your work, when you have a new idea or an idea that hasn't been around for a while, or a new mix of ideas, like again this Roman legionary right here. It's an interesting concept. And I've seen Roman legionaries done before, but not like this one. The fact that I've made it a Roman legionary by accident, which I've talked about in the last video, aside, this is a conceptual accomplishment. As we just talked, visual, not so much raw effort, not at all technical, but it excels in those 2 points. And the bonus layer of it all is presentation. How do you present your work? When you wear it, or a photo is also the means of the presentation of a work. So is it a good photo? This one is, thanks to Chris, again, from Freitag Photography. Yeah, so a good photo, or just the way you wear it, like the arm guy, about which I will talk soon, it makes a big difference too. Just how you play with your work, how do you present it. Okay. Now, one last definition, and then I promise I will show you some more pictures. We need to talk about what characteristic is. Well, the simplest definition, it's the opposite of generic. So if you have something that is generic, you know how generic looks. I mean, I could also try to pull out a definition of generic out of my ass, but I think everyone knows what generic means. If we have like 100 gray dogs and you are a yellow dog, then you're going to be a characteristic dog. So characteristic is the opposite of generic. All right. With all those things in mind, let's dive into the pictures and I will talk about what types of accomplishment apply to each one of them, briefly at least, and that will help you understand why some works are memorable and some aren't, and why some excel. Obviously, the best kind of memorability is when all of those checkboxes are checked, or at least like 3 of them. Let's dive right into it. So first of all, memorable costumes. Let's go with the memorable ones. Bruce D. Mitchell, and photo is by Preston Yeager. I think I misspelled it, it's without an H. Anyway, yeah, presentation that we just talked about, fucking A, this is a good photo, and this is also like, just look at him. You're not gonna, he's not just standing there, you're not gonna forget that face that quickly. Technical and visual aesthetics, yes, absolutely, especially in the visual compartment. I don't know if he made the suit himself or if it's one of those existing spacesuits and I don't see the rest of the outfit. And by spacesuits, I mean stratosphere suits. But regardless, aesthetic accomplishment, 100%, it's perfectly visually balanced. If he made the suit himself, then also, wow, what a technical accomplishment. However, your technical accomplishment will be judged by what people are used to. At which point, it doesn't actually matter that much if he made the suit himself or no for the overall result. If he tells it to someone and it's like, yeah, wow, you sewn it yourself on a sewing machine or like by hand, that's one hell of an accomplishment and raw effort. But that plays a minor role in the overall looks of the whole thing. So this whole technical thing, sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't. I also know a guy who made like some really cool pouches, and I was like, okay, those are cool, authentic looking military pouches. Where did you find them? And he's like, no, I made them. I spent 3 hours making each one of them. And I'm like, whoa, that's cool, but it's also for the purpose of aesthetic perfection, kind of not taking a shortcut of an existing thing already being there. So those things have kind of a interesting relationship, as you see. Here is another from Bruce D. Mitchell. Yeah, conceptually, rather cool. You don't see that kind of forms and shapes and all that a lot of time. And it's a padded leather vest. So it's an interesting concept. So a concept doesn't have to be something super big or something. It can come just in terms of forms and shapes and stuff. And of course it plays closely together with the aesthetic aspect. So this is an aesthetic accomplishment. It's a good photo. It's a good presentation. Raw effort, of course. Here is a lot of raw effort. Here is even more raw effort. He made this vest from scratch, as far as I know. So that's one hell of a raw effort. Directed into creating something awesome looking as this, which hasn't been there around in this form and shape a lot of times. So you see how many checkboxes he's checking here. Raw effort, technical, because how do you even make this? Aesthetic, looks amazing. Conceptual, yes. Novelty and rarity, yes. Bonus layer presentation, yes, a good photo. So this checks all the boxes. This is why I remembered, when I think Bruce D. Mitchell, I think this costume. Another one from him, yeah, the photo is, by the way, by Kerry Kilgo. And this photo is by Jamai Vu. I'm probably butchering all the photographers' names. Anyway, this one actually won a costuming contest on Wasteland Weekend. Let's see how many checkboxes this one checks. So this is like, okay, raw effort, less than the previous one, but still, yeah, there is a lot of stuff that needed to be done. Aesthetic, yes, absolutely. And let me tell you what, making a minimalistic or at least semi-minimalistic work, which this is compared to something loaded as this, sometimes takes more raw effort than just clobbering something together that has a lot of detail and all that, but doesn't look that aesthetically pleasing. So creating something aesthetically well looking oftentimes takes a lot of raw effort and also of technical effort. And those 3 can be completely decoupled from the conceptual part. It can be something boring and old and whatever, but it still can look good and be executed well, you know? That is the point that a lot of people miss. Just because you've put a lot of effort into something doesn't mean it's good. Just because it is visually polished doesn't mean it's a new concept. Just because it's a new concept doesn't mean that it's gonna look good because you didn't put anything into polishing it aesthetically. So yeah, you're gonna remember this fucking guy. I mean, memorable. So let's just go through checkboxes quick, otherwise I will be talking forever. Raw effort, yes. Technical, a bit. Aesthetic, absolutely. So aesthetic doesn't necessarily mean it's pretty. It can also be ugly and scary, which this is. And conceptual, yes. I didn't see that kind of stuff a lot of times. And presentation, fuck, this is scary. And this is basically great. So, since I didn't see it a lot of times, that is... amongst other things, for the reason how nicely aesthetically executed it is. So you're noticing that all of those parts are interacting with each other really, really closely. Let me see if the recording's going. It's going great. Those parts interact with each other really, really closely. They cooperate like cogs in a machine. So there is an interplay between those. And when we get to the unmemorable costumes part of the video, after I'm done with these, then you will see how in more detail. Next one, it's Callum the Dust Monkey, and the photo is by DG Steve. And this is a aesthetically cleanly executed artwork with, I would say, at least some amount of raw effort, of course. As we've established, nothing comes without any effort at all. But it's not one of those works where it's like, oh, it's a power armor assembled out of chainmail and he spent like five years of his life assembling this. No, this went faster, but it's still aesthetically great. It took some amount of effort. It's conceptually very interesting because Callum is one of those people doing the historically inspired costumes really well. The presentation is good, the photo is good, he's standing there really cool. All of that, so checks all the check boxes. He has his unique style, which usually comes from this conceptual part. And you know, this aesthetic and technical part, it's like playing a melody on a guitar. I have a note here. So whatever your melody is, your melody can be as brilliant as you want it to be, but if you're playing like not getting a straight sound out, not even one, then it doesn't matter how great your concept is, you need to work on your aesthetic and technical points. However, there are some guitar players that are amazing technically, and they get a nice melody played, but it's boring. So there is that. If you compare it to music, that is that. Anthony, from it's the workshop master from the series The 100. So we went to Wasteland Weekend together this year, and you see his armor right here. Now, going through the checkboxes real fast. Raw effort, yes, took him some amount of time. I don't think it's his most effortful build that he's done in his life. No, definitely not. He's done way worse, but it's still a lot of effort. Just not for him, you know, he's done entire spaceship interiors. So, you know, the raw effort depends on what you compare it to. For this guy, it wasn't a lot in general, yes. Technical, absolutely. There was laser cutter involved, there was a lot of know-how involved. Again, he builds props professionally, so there is a shitload of technical know-how that went into this. Aesthetic, yes, looks nice, visually balanced, everything works. Conceptual, absolutely. Especially because of the combination of that high-tech gear with the cowboy hat and this poncho-looking thing. So, yeah, it checks all the check boxes. And in fact, conceptually, that combination is what makes it good. Imagine it without the hat and the poncho. It would still be a great costume, mind you, but that would be just another cyber vest guy. But like this, it's a cyber fucking cowboy. Presentation, fuck yeah. I don't know whose bike it is, comment in the description below. Great bike, by the way, with gasoline. And it looks like he's got a parking ticket on Wasteland, which he didn't, but I wish he did. That wouldn't have been funny. Moving on. It's Eric's wife, Marie, and yeah, I don't know which, Jesus, I don't know which one made the costume, which one of them made the costume, but going through the boxes, effort, yes, some effort is always present. Technical, yes, they know how to craft. Aesthetic, absolutely looks nice. Conceptual, yes, those are interesting forms and shapes. Now, this is a prime example of an interesting conceptual work. This is novel, this is rare, I didn't see a lot of works looking like this. Now, I've seen a lot of attempts of something that looks like this, but since this is so aesthetically nicely executed, then that makes the difference. See, I'm repeating myself. You can totally execute, like, I've seen so many times I've seen the same concept being executed by different people, and the one will achieve it and the other will fail because of the aesthetic part. I'm telling you again and again and again, learn your design fundamentals. All right, moving on. This is Eric, the picture is by Thomas Sprenger, and this is Eric's helmet, which I'm really jealous of. A raw effort, yes. Being the dumbass he is, he did it without any power tools, as far as I know, so with a handsaw, which is an incredible raw effort. He also dished and domed it out by hand with a hammer, using a lot of technical knowledge and gaining a lot of technical knowledge in the process. Aesthetically, it's extremely pleasing and scary and beautiful and all that. And conceptually, this is not something I've seen a lot of times. And being the ripped son of a hot piece of ass that he is, and having a good photo taken of him, excellent presentation. So this checks all the boxes, which is why when he posted this, I was like, all right, why am I doing post-apo crafting again? This guy is amazing. You know, I can just go home. Next one, Evan Oll's backpack. This one looks visually really nicely. Conceptually, it's okay. I mean, those spine things are really what makes stand it out. That is the really good detail right there. And other than that, raw effort, some presentation, it's not done yet, so whatever, but here it's mostly conceptual and balanced aesthetics that make it stand out. Again, Evan All, and he says that with this mask on, his vision is blocked by 80%, which I think is okay, because being the fucking bird beak guy, he's just gonna poke everyone in the eye because he can see anything, and then everyone else also can see anything, so the world balances itself out in an equilibrium. But bottom line here is, while I don't think this is very technically or effort-wise accomplished, it is conceptually and aesthetically nice, so it looks nice, and you will not see a lot of people with that fucking bird face. So it stands out in its time. I will get to the time aspect later. Now this is a great example of why color in the apocalypse, which would be a great topic for a separate video, why color in the apocalypse is totally a doable thing, totally a thing you should do, you should not avoid it, and this is by Frank Valenti. So he just took this vest. It is his first work. Now let's look at this. Brilliant technical execution. He did everything that he needed to do to it technically. Aesthetically as well, look at how many different distressing layers there are. Aesthetically, it's just so nicely balanced. It has all the right detail and not too much of the detail. You know, some people will just make it full of bottle caps and stuff. He didn't, and it looks just so beautiful. It's one of the favorite post-apocalyptic works to this day for me, because in its time, today, it's not only pretty, it's also conceptually novel and rare. I didn't see a lot of people do this at all. Now, this might even take off as a trend, because here is what. With this in its time aspect in mind, some works have such a great impact on delivery that they will forever be remembered. They will be forever quoted, shown to newbies, and so on and so forth. At which point we're going to Jake McKinnon. I don't know the photographer's name. I'm sorry about that. Please comment in the video description who took the pictures. But these are the classic pictures of Jake McKinnon. And Jake McKinnon is one of the Wasteland Weekend legends. All of us saw these pictures before we even started costuming. So in his time, it was also technically and effort-wise really much. If the Wasteland Weekend scene was anything like the European scene back then, that was an amazing amount of effort, which it wouldn't be today. You know, a lot of people do something that entails more effort than this nowadays, and that's considered mediocre today. But back then it was great. However, what has stood the test of time and will forever be remembered and shown to baby Wastelanders all over the world are Jake's huge fucking scissors. And you know, the way he presents the works, look at that psycho face. Amazing presentation, amazing conceptual thing. So this is one of those works that left such a deep impact, that engraved itself so deeply into the fabric of time that it will forever be remembered. Look at that huge fucking drill thing. Wow. And aesthetically, obviously, completely balanced. It doesn't lack anything. It's just great in its own right aesthetically. And of course, well technically executed. You need to have some handicrafting skills to make this thing right here. But most of all, as I said, conceptually. Moving on, a skipped one here. Grace Liner, photo by Mark Macho. I love it when photographers do this. I also do this myself as a photographer. Just a small, unobtrusive mark, so everyone sharing the picture will always be also sharing your link. Because not everyone gives the fuck to, you know, track down who the photographer is. This one is by Ed Lee. So, this is Grace Liner, one of the best fashion wastelanders, if I would call it that. It's really hard to put into, you know, into a box. She makes fashionable post-apocalyptic costumes. So this was from the water wetsuit contest, I think. I don't know if this year or last year. And this Raven lady right here, this photo is by Preston Yeager again. This photo right here is of her this year's Wasteland costume, and it's just gorgeous. I wish I had more photos of it, showing more aspects. But look at this, it's very memorable, it's very aesthetically pleasing, and it stood out because it's not your typical Wasteland girl look. It's really, really different. In her own way, she stands out conceptually. So she's the one who's not afraid to do something wrong, in quotation marks. And that is actually on my list. What leads to forgettable costumes is indecisiveness, lack of daring, being afraid to do things wrong, and wanting to follow existing rules and trends all the time. That leads to a lack of characterization. She has none of that shit. She's just like, okay, this is my idea of Wasteland. And this guy's also, this is my first post-apocalyptic costume. I'm not afraid to break the rules. And by that, I'm not talking about the universal design rules. If you break those, your costume looks like crap. You know, it's like breaking the rules of safe lifting in the gym. Oh, I'm gonna deadlift with a rounded back. Well, good job, you spinal anarchist. Now you broke your back. No, I'm talking about breaking the rules of trends. So rules of trends can and should sometimes be broken to achieve great results that stand out, that are rare. Moving on. The costumer is Julianne Gerner, and the photo is by Frank Bouvet. I hope I pronounce it right. Bouvet. Look at this gorgeous policeman. Not only does this tell you a story really well and really fast, it's also so over the top and ridiculous and awesome and creative. I just love this. This is one of my favorite pictures ever. And this, let's go through the check boxes. Raw effort, not so much actually. Sorry. I mean, could be more. The jacket is not even distressed a lot, although that's not always necessary. I wouldn't say this has a huge amount of raw effort. It has some, but not too much. Technically, yeah, for the shoulder pads, it took some work, but not super much. Aesthetic and conceptual is, however, where it explodes like a bomb here. That's where you call the post-apocalyptic fashion police and have this guy arrested for being too awesome. This is just not something I've seen a lot, you know. Oh, wow. Just wow. And the way it's presented, the photo is great, the guy looks great. So this one scores in aesthetics and conceptual so much. You know, a lot of people have done a police officer on post-apocalyptic settings. I've done my own as well. But this is something else. And it's simple. You know, a lot of those ideas are simple once someone comes up with those. Checking if it's still running. Yes, it is. So once you come up with this, it's like, wow, how didn't I think of that? This is amazing. Another one by Julian Gerner. He actually had submitted this into the unmemorable costumes category. I've just have it in this folder for whatever reason. Probably because I've just sorted it into this. Because yes, it's not really done yet. It's not even half the costume done yet. It's simple, but it's aesthetically pleasing with those grenades, and it's very memorable. You know, people are going to be like, you remember this grenade guy with the chest plate? So here is another point for you. Linguistic description check. So, memorable designs are easy to describe with a few strong words. That guy with the huge fucking scissors that can bite off your leg. that raven lady, that fish lady, that neon vest guy, that guy with a samurai hat and a psycho face and a space flyer suit and whatnot going on for him. That guy with the skull mask and that leather vest that looks amazing. That cyber cowboy. Oh, I have Alex Pringle here. Gotta get back to him. Skipped for some reason. So doing him next. Also, linguistic description check is implying instead of blatantly showing a story element is a mistake. Imagine if this dude, instead of having those blinking things on his shoulders, would not have them, and instead have just a hidden officer's badge somewhere in his inner pocket. He could go around on the LARP and say like, yeah, I'm a police officer, let me take out my badge out of my pocket and show it to you, this is my character backstory. But at that point he would be running his mouth, telling you a story which he should have told with the costume, which he did here. So since he did, it's memorable. It tells the story well. I say it again and again, costumes are all about telling stories. So whenever you rely on your words or additional explanations or like handouts to people about your costume to learn the history of your character on LARP, that's all bullshit. Just put all of your story out there, at least the important parts. You know, maybe when the game unfolds and he plays, he has a hidden picture of his dead family in the pocket. You don't have to wear it openly. Not every story is a major story, but major defining characteristics of your costume, of your story, of your character, of whatever it is you're trying to do, need to be worn openly. Right, here's the next one. This one is Ludwig Grimm Nyberg, and the photo is by Bina GN. And this is really, really nice. I mean, it's not really technically that good, I guess, and also not that much effort, but conceptually and aesthetically, it still scores. It's nicely visually balanced. That kind of skull mask I don't see a lot, and it all just flows into each other pretty much flawlessly. So, yeah, again, conceptual and aesthetic score. Could you do more to it? Sure, but it's still memorable. I would remember this fucking guy. The guy with the tire stuff and the weird skull mask thing. See, you can still describe him. Here's another one of him, the evolution of his costume. And here's another characteristic, memorable element, that hyper mag on his Kalashnikov. You would remember that. However, here I find it pity that the bullet belt is kind of hiding the stuff, because that kind of bullet belt, it's kind of generic detail right here. Yeah. Moving on to Alex Pringle. So this is a very distinctive look for Alex Pringle. And he is a Facebook pal of mine. We've been exchanging messages and works for a long time. And he is characteristic in that he does that angular, practical looking armor. This one is from polycarbonate, so it's actually literally bulletproof. That's kind of his thing. This is a different armor, but in the same style. So whenever I see this style, I'm like, yeah, that's Alex. It's not that hard to identify him because he has a consistent style. It's characteristic for him, so it's kind of hard to make. It's literally bulletproof. As far as I can tell. Alex, please don't have it shot or something. I don't want you to die, you're a great crafter. Yeah, it's scoring in the raw effort and technical. Aesthetically, I find it aesthetically pleasing. Now, these are not great photos. These are just, webcam photos from his home that he took. Conceptually, it's interesting. It always reminds me on Demolition Man, because before doing polycarbonate, which is kind of his thing right now, he did a lot of tire armor. I will show you more of his works, actually, in the next folder. So let's move on to the arm guy. So this is one of the highlights here. The photo is by Christina Shea. And the guy that made this is Trevor John Valley. And this is the arm guy from Wasteland Weekend. We couldn't track down who made this photo, sorry about that. And this are have been taken by his wife. And you see that the arm guy, so the arm stands for Attitude Readjustment Mechanism, he is fucking memorable. So all of us, even 20 years down the road, gonna remember the arm guy. I had difficulties remembering his real name but I could remember the arm guy. I will always... Arm guy, you're forever in my heart. And this guy got, I think, the 2nd place or the 3rd place on Wasteland Weekend Costume Contest this year for a good reason. It's extremely memorable. So conceptually speaking, novelty and rarity and all that, it's great. Presentation-wise, of course, it's also great, and you should have seen him live. He was going around like that hunchback dude from the movie 300 with the Spartans, and that was awesome. This guy is just wow. Is it technically difficult what he's done? Kinda. I would say it is a good effort, good technical skill in assembling an arm like this. Now, if it was actually moving and squirting water or whatever, doing stuff, then I would go like, yeah, technically completely amazing. It's not completely amazing technically, it's decent as it is. Maybe he will upgrade it as the time passes with some cybernetic stuff and, hydraulics and whatnot, I don't know. Aesthetically, also great. It's such an imbalanced look, it's great. Now, let me tell you what does not constitute a memorable costume, but what a lot of people focus all the time. As Anthony said, the guy shown before, the cyber cowboy, focus on what pays the rent, and for him it means what makes him earn money, as the costume and prop designer for professional shows he's working on. And that would be, for example, this arm, if you would do it in a studio. Because this is the memorable part. This is the part that people are going to remember. That guy with the huge arm. Does anyone care if his shoelaces are distressed? No. Does anyone care if he has like some pouches and pockets going on here, like this flasks that he has here? No. But so many people will go like, oh, so I need to add more detail to my character to make him more interesting. I will just add a utility belt with some shit on it. Okay, great, you've added some bags to your character. Now what? Do you remember if Jake McKinnon had some bags, some pouches on him? No, you remember this fucking thing. I think it actually says the photographer's name on here. I just can't decipher it. Fuck. I can't decipher it, sorry. Anyway, what you will remember are the actually memorable elements, and no one ever will remember what kind of pouch you had somewhere. And again, so many people will go like, I'm making a medic, so I'm gonna just take a pouch and inside of that are my items. I will maybe add a medical symbol on top of the pouch. Yeah, great job, but it's tiny detail. Now, certainly a lot of tiny detail, and that the fact that your costume consists only out of some weird tiny detail can be an interesting concept, but 99% of cases, tiny detail does not matter for memorability. Moving on here, man, I don't envy this dude. He got owned by the arm guy. This is Even All, and the photo is by CC Hope, and this is his Wasteland Saint or Wasted Saint. And you see some pixelations here, not because the photographer is bad, the photographer is great, but because I just took the Facebook photo. And the reason I did that, because here's a quote from me you can use. Memorability is not about pixel count. So many people, photographers and graphic designers and AAA games designers and everyone else and costume designers will focus like, how much is this tiny piece of belt distressed? How high is the resolution of the photo? How... they will lose themselves in tiny detail and all that resolution stuff, but sometimes forget to create the actually memorable elements. But this one has both. The original photo has a great resolution. And he was not the only one asking, hey, do you want a high resolution photo? And I'm like, no, memorability is not about pixel count. If you're a photographer or if you're a model or anything else, it's not about like being able to zoom in to the pixel. Or in case of a costume, looking at the tiniest detail. You can do that as love, out of love to your already great looking costume at the end. If you feel like it, like, yeah, sure, you can go here and distress this and add tiniest detail and blah. But here's what. Tiny detail and all that super duper resolution, whether we're talking pixel resolution or costume resolution in quotation marks, it should not play against your actual storytelling main memorable elements of that costume, and that should not replace them. So just loading your costume with crap, I've seen so many costumes of people that looked literally like they covered themselves in glue, and that had someone's crate with spare pieces of fabric explode all over them. Sure, that would be a great, well, it is some raw effort. Technically, it's not very complicated. Aesthetically, it might or not be mediocrely pleasing, and conceptually, it's just a bunch of stuff glued together or stitched together or whatever. So then you just add a shitload of other detail to your costume, and then you're surprised why it's not kicking. Well, here's why. Because all you did is mediocre raw effort with maybe or maybe not mediocre aesthetics. Now, having just one of those things executed brilliantly already grants you more result than that. So if you're doing the just load it with a shitload of detail look, you're doing it wrong. Sorry to say that, but that's the fact. But even right here did everything right. It has a lot of detail, but it's all balanced. It's all in theme with all of this. And I mean, just look at that. All right, moving on to the unmemorable costumes pile. Those were submissions that people have submitted, as I have asked in the Nuclear Snail community group, the link to which is the first link in the video description, to submit their least memorable costumes. So thank you everyone very much for submitting those. I'm really happy to have those, and let's talk about them. So this one is by Trio Maxwell. And this looks like your typical zombie survivor. So does this, and we will get to that in a sec. It wasn't supposed to be a zombie survivor, it was supposed to be in line with like something Fallout, but all the beginner Wastelander costumes end up looking like zombie apocalypse, usually. Why? Because zombie apocalypse, here's a picture from me. That's not me, that's a friend of mine. I took the picture and made the costume. Anyway, the zombie apocalypse is usually, it doesn't require a lot of specialty materials or specialty, starting stuff to craft from. You can just go with everyday things, which is what you also have at hand if you're just a beginning Wastelander. So, But if you look at this picture compared to this picture, first of all, the photo itself is a lot better. There is not that much going on differently in terms of costume, but the photo itself is better, then the aesthetics are better. This is really, really, really balanced out. All of this is super balanced, visually, aesthetically. This is still kind of clusterfucking here and there, so that's the difference number 2. Conceptually, same. Just some fucking zombie survivor guy with some elbow protectors and stuff, whatever he found at home. And it's both just the practical zombie apocalypse looking thing. Conceptually, those are literally the same thing. But aesthetically, this is better, and the presentation is better in form of photo. So this is again why you should do your aesthetics, and for that you need to learn, design fundamentals. Okay, bonus layer presentation, we had that. Raw effort, it's relative. Someone just starting out might have put a lot of effort into this, while I've done this being already experienced like really fast. But raw effort is a thing that you sometimes really, really feel, especially if you're new, but to someone else, that effort that you've really been struggling with. I mean, I don't know if Francesco was struggling with this year, that's his name, Francesco Morando. But you know what I mean. Just because you've struggled, especially as a beginner, doesn't mean that just that technical effort makes you good automatically. It's unfortunately the truth. Anyway, moving on to this dude. But before that, I gotta say, this is a decent zombie survivor. All of that aside, depending on the setting, it's not bad. It's just not very memorable. Which is, again, repeating the point that memorability is not the same as overall quality. Moving on to hot dogs. And this is by Enchanted Fable Photography, and the guy is Aiden Leak. Yeah, this has all the cliche elements of a newbie Wastelander, like that football pad, not a lot modded, that weird generic mask and goggles and whatnot and shit, and just that white t-shirt, fucking horrible, and the vest and stuff. But what I really love here is the crotch work. On the back, on the butt, he has the 24 hours open sign. So those are interesting, nice jokes. And that makes it memorable. So while I will not remember the top part of this, not at all, I will definitely remember the crotch work. And also the fact that he has his legs covered in shields. So like the bottom half is actually good in terms of memorability. The bottom part is actually great. Moving on, Alex Pringle, and the photo is, I think that's the photographer's decal here, but by Darklit Imagery. And this is one of Alex's first costumes. He also has submitted it to the unmemorable pile. And I'm just showing you what people have submitted into that pile. I'm not saying that all of those are not memorable. Some of them are, as you see, at least partially, like this guy's crotch work. Crotch work should be a word from now on. Anyway, Alex Pringle, from the start, was working with thick fucking tires. A lot of them, and creating, those angular shapes with them. So you can see that this is kind of the first thing that led to this. Can you not see that? It's really amazing. I love Alex's work. Anyway, this is memorable. This is maybe technically not that great, and the guy couldn't move in it a lot and all that, and Alex got tons better since then, but it's still the same memorable style. So memorability is not about pixel count. A rather generic pistol from Ashkan Sapinur. I'm sorry, I'm butchering everyone's name. You're not the only one whose name I'm butchering, mate. So yeah, your generic gun. What else do you want me to say? This is just the most average gun ever. Yes, great example. Oh Jesus, here goes the Sparkplug Blaine. So it's Blaine Ulfsbane Thomas, and I've misspelled Blaine, forgot the I. Anyway, he also has better works. Nowadays he rocks this. But back then, holy shit, that t-shirt and those glasses with that hat and all that, and this undistressed football pad. So let's just diss this. He's fine with it. So let's take a piss out, because he's a really cool dude and he submitted it to be made fun of. So raw effort, none. Maybe some in the Sparkplug mask, but probably back then it was a huge achievement to have made his first mask. Technical, come on. Aesthetic, no, looks like shit. Conceptual, fuck no. And bonus layer presentation, absolutely not. Also, it has the wrong association. So you see how I said Sparkplug Bane? So Chris, the Kleiner Zorn Chris, also was like, I thought of Bane. I'm like, yeah, me too. Yeah. So this kind of reminds of something else that it's not supposed to be, but at the same time it brings nothing of its own to the table. This is just garbage. And he got a lot better since then. It's not a full costume of his now, but I purposely just took this jacket. Now, it doesn't show off how much better he got. He's a great dude. He has made a tutorial how to make this jacket, by the way, or this effect on the jacket. But just the reason I took this is to show you that some elements have remained. Like, but not really. You look at this and you, oh, it's kind of simple, but looks like shit. And you look at this, oh, it's kind of simple, and it looks good. Why? So let's go through this. So raw effort, definitely more, as well as technical knowledge that went into this, because this just took a lot of work compared to just putting on some fucking football pads. Aesthetically, this is like, both is simple, but this is perfect aesthetic balance. This is perfect not. So this scores aesthetically over this by a long shot. Conceptual, novelty and rarity. You see, in this case, and this has been done recently, in this day and age of everyone overloading their shit all over the place, being sleek like this, same as with the Raven Lady before, makes you stand out. So just having different aesthetics makes you conceptually stand out. Cool, right? This is not his full costume, but again, this is a great example of both being simple, but these aesthetics dominating these by a long shot. Brandon James Croning. Fuck. Now, he also got better since then. Those flip-flops, holy moly. A lot of people would go like, defend their costume that looks like this. Like, oh, but like this is what you would realistically do, blah, you wouldn't have time for a costume, all of that. You know what, whatever. This looks horrible from so many different perspectives, and I'm glad that you got better, James. I don't even... Let's just go to the next one. Love you, mate. Callum, the Dust Monkey, one of his first works. And this is not a cool Photoshop effect. This is actually just one of the first generations of digital cameras. That's why it looks like this. And he has submitted it into the unmemorable pile. And sure, nowadays it would be pretty unremarkable, but I still really like the aesthetics and the look of this chest and shoulder stuff. I do not like those stereotypical protectors here. Also, the weapon looks kind of interesting. So I would not say this is unmemorable, especially again since we have established that memorability is an accomplishment that stands out in its time. I think back then it was decent, and it's still not the most horrible costume, not the most unmemorable costume nowadays. Moving on, Dana Turner. The cat aside, this looks like your typical Wasteland Weekend, bald and muscles and beard, probably, dude, which there are a ton of. So this is so extremely unremarkable. Let's just do the points for the fun of it. Raw effort, not a lot. Again, even if it took a lot of effort to get into this, this is just not a lot of raw effort. Just, you know, some skirt and stuff and some jacket, and picking up a cat was probably difficult as well. Technical, also not a lot going on, some dye-tie stuff, and that's pretty much it as far as I can see. Maybe some distressing as well. Aesthetics are always arguable, but it's not like the super most aesthetics things I always saw. And conceptually, this just looks like your guy from the local Gothic concert or something like this. Presentation, yeah, amazing presentation with the cat. So yeah, I also assume that Dana got a lot better since then. But this just doesn't tick a lot of those boxes, which is why this is not particularly remarkable. Moving on, submitted by even all the humble bragger as unremarkable. Generic scavenger. Now, why does it still stand out? Here is a better shot. Look at those syringes. This is amazing. This still stands out because aesthetically it's good. Really good, actually. It's really focused on the story, like with those syringes and all that and those horns. Those are characteristic elements, big defining characteristic elements that are conceptually interesting. Technical execution is fine. You know, nothing to write home about, but fine. But conceptually, this dominates. Moving on to another example, Faith Roswell, and the photo is by Thomas Sprenger. And Faith submitted this saying, I have a post-apocalyptic block. So I've said to that, then look somewhere outside of the post-apocalypse to unblock yourself. For example, the hexagon shape, which I crudely sketched here as a bra in Photoshop. The hexagon shape is the, you know, your typical typical futuristic sci-fi thing, science fiction. So look to some other styles and try combining them if you're stuck. Sometimes it helps. She's probably not going to do that because she's just looking for ideas of her own, but this still helped her, and I'm glad about that. So yeah, let's analyze this. Raw effort, some. It's a decent base. I mean, it's an amazing base. It's aesthetically good. She rocks it. The photo is great. So presentation is good. Aesthetics are good, as I said. Technical, everything that needed to be done was done, but it's not like a technical wonder work or something. This is pretty mediocre technical aspect for modern post-apocalyptic modding. Conceptual, not a lot going on. So what I did here is just add some more conceptual stuff, as well as simply eye catchers. You know, just adding some eye catchers sometimes will make it better. Just don't go and add 500 eye catchers. Add 3 maximum. Better just 2. One on the front, one on the back. So this orange part does this, and the hexagon bra and all that. Now, if she did a hexagon bra from real metal like this, that would also be a technical accomplishment. added to all that. Philip Prasek. Now this looks like your typical grounder from the series The 100, right? Take like 20 of those, put them behind Lexa, and there you have a grounder army. And we're slowly getting to the point with Chris here and Gaff or Jeff Jones, to the point where I'm going to talk about why you might want to not stand out with your costume. So this is a great NPC costume. It doesn't have any remarkable elements to it. It has this cohesive style. Aesthetically, it's nice, but it's not like, it's like these two would go well together. It's just a nice base and all that. So moving on to this. Gaff Jones or Jeff Jones, I don't know how to pronounce your name properly, mate, sorry about that. This is a great base, and it's the base for his Metro-inspired character, but it could be for any universe out there, really. It's really, really, really generic. However, here is the point where I gotta say that, and I probably said this already, it's so nicely aesthetically balanced and executed. It's just so pleasing to the eye, nothing missing, nothing's too much, that as a base, it already stands out in its own right. In this day and age of everyone overloading their shit with 100 bottle caps, this dude just stands out because he's so clean in quotation marks, although he's perfectly distressed. Nice distressing work, nice, technically not so much going on, but it does everything it should, so these really go together. And he's right now struggling to make it more memorable, but you know what? Base work is the hardest part. Achieving this is more tedious and less interesting than adding all the cool detail. So you have done the hard part of your work, mate. Now just find some interesting, unique looking rebreather or whatever, maybe position it on your chest and whatnot. Just find some pimp elements and make them stand out. Moving on, this is Kleiner Zorn, aka Chris, and the photo is by Moritz Jendral, one of our famous German LARP photographers, and it was taken on the Fate LARP, and Chris did an NPC there, so non-player character. And this was designed on purpose to be unremarkable. So there was this overall look, kind of like how the organizers wanted all of those raiders, or called dusters back then on Fate, to look, and it goes in line with that, but none of them was supposed to stand out, at least not your average guy, which Chris is playing here. Maybe their officer looked something special, I don't know, I wasn't there. But this is one of those examples where you want your characters to not stand out too much. So this is like, in quotation marks, a war boy. Maybe there was, maybe there wasn't an Immortan Joe to accompany them. So let's go through the checkboxes. Raw effort, yeah, there is some, as well as technical part. Aesthetics are on point, nothing's missing. It's not one of those costumes like this where I say it's a base and it's still lacking something. It's a full actual costume. It could, of course, serve as a base for something more memorable and all that, but as it stands here, it's a full costume. So aesthetics good. Conceptual, yeah, it falls in line with what it is supposed to do conceptually. So you could call it a full conceptual success or a full lack of concept there, as depends on the way you see it. Because, it was the goal to make it unmemorable. So yeah, I gotta say, I also particularly think that this leg armor right here is actually kind of a memorable shape, but that is something I see only when I look at the details. All in all, if you look at this guy, like, you'll have to look 3 times until you notice that and start thinking about whether or not that is memorable. So again, like, if you're doing some detail like this will not make your entire costume memorable. This is just a detail. Make big detail that is memorable. Moving on, another one also from Zorn, aka Chris, and the photo is by Elaine Erdending. And this was not supposed to be an NPC character. That was one of his actual costumes back then in 2015, and I've actually guessed the year right just by looking at it, and it has all of those cliche elements. Now, I'm actually pretty sure then that in its time it was actually conceptually way more interesting and rare than it is nowadays. Because back in 2015, all the scene was still growing and stuff and all that, and this was kind of the thing that the cool kids were doing. It's just nowadays we look at this and like, oh, this is a cliche raider. So let's go over all the cliche elements and laugh at them because that's why it was submitted. So that World War II helmet, as Chris said, because it's cool, and what I find particularly cool or uncool is all of that psycho writing on it. Like, that's such a typical thing to do, especially for crazy raider characters. Those blades, they actually look pretty cool. But it's, you know, your typical curved blade, oh my god, so evil raider. Then there is this really cliche leg protector going on here with some pouches and some minor decorations all over the place, and your typical gas mask with some stuff glued on over it. Like, again, back then it was probably conceptually a lot better, but nowadays it's exactly as what Chris submitted as your typical forgettable cliche raider. Even if that wasn't made like this, with that in mind back then, I think. Chris has improved since then in terms of memorability, especially because of his ears. You see them here. And those ears actually remind of the Russian Cheburashka, which is a cartoon figure. So, yeah, you're kind of gonna remember this more than you remember this, you know? Because this has all the cliche elements, but nothing that really stands out as unique. Well, those ears, I don't know. Well, okay, Sean from the Wasteland Warriors also has that kind of ears, but a different costume entirely. But that's like two dudes that I know that use that kind of ears. So to me, this is the element that sets Chris apart nowadays, most of all. And the most memorable from looking at this picture anyway, without going through all of his outfits that exist. And here you can also see a contrast of him looking like a Germanic wildling, while I look like a noble Roman legionnaire. And yes, characters of different distressing levels and detailing levels and all that can exist in the same universe. If you want more proof, go see the 100, the series, again. Watch the whole thing, one of my favorite series ever. And there you have the mountain people and also the grounders and also the space people and all that. Yes, characters of different looks can exist in the same universe, and this isn't even not that different there. It's just, you know, a lawful guy with a wild guy, or whatever cliches you might throw at that. Moving on, Jess Unicorn. Amazing presentation with the cat, but otherwise, yes, as submitted, it just looks like your average punk rock girl out on a trip to a concert. So Jess, unless you're carrying your cat with you at all times, which I hope you do. Fuck, now I'm sad because the cat has died. Fuck me. Anyway, yeah, unless you would carry a cat with a costume like this, you don't really stand out. Joe, the Wasteland Warriors Warlord, his first costume. Back then, this was super unique and conceptual. Super fucking duper. Like, you might see a lot more of that going on nowadays and go like, oh, that's kind of boring. But even with that in mind, like those goggles and stuff, that diesel punk inspired look, Joe was one of the guys who pioneered that. So back then it was conceptually great, and all the other points are at least medium. So yeah, he submitted it as forgettable, but no, it's not forgettable. Staying at Joe, he submitted this. I can't decipher the photographer's logo, sorry about that. But it's from the Fate LARP very long time ago. And Joe has submitted this as forgettable. And sure, there is not a lot of technical or maybe even aesthetic stuff going on and all that. But look at this, it's Bazooka Joe. It's so dominant. You will remember the guy carrying the huge dildo launcher. You will remember Bazooka Joe, and in fact his Steam name nowadays is Bazooka Joe because of that, I believe. So Joe, how is this forgettable if it gave you your today's nickname? Like, wow. So this is a prime example of how just a huge eye-catcher and conceptual thing just overrides everything else. It can work like this. Moving on, Consti, the Tacti Consti. This is Consti's outfit, and this is Consti's outfit just a bit later. There are more pictures of this, you probably saw them. So he worked on this and we worked on this together between those two, and then I made some good pictures of him as opposed to this snapshot just taken at home. And you can see that aesthetically a lot of stuff happened, but also story-wise especially. You all will never forget this never forget stock, at least the ones of you that saw it, with the names of his fallen friends and all that. So that's other thing. Like, here is some visual stuff going on, and here is some story stuff going on, and on the visual stuff right here is his unit name or whatever, and he also has this rope right here, and I know I'm telling it to you instead of showing you the pictures. There are pictures showing those elements very well. I just don't want to get out of this folder right now. And between this and this, there is a huge difference. And those are like last, as Consti said, last 5% of detailing or so that add that story, that add that detail, that add that memorability. But for one, he also looks like your cliche back then Resistopia concept character, because we did this as a concept character for an ex-military veteran character for this alien apocalypse setting. So this, yeah, he just looks archetypical here. He looks like an archetype, and there was not an archetype of this kind of character back then in LARP, believe it or not, at least not in executed in that quality presentation and aesthetics. Well, and also some conceptual stuff going on, obviously, too, with the logo and all that, but you know what I mean. It was just a very well executed, kind of new concept, but not really, but a really well resurrected and combined together archetype, which we were aiming at, and that is why it worked out. And we are moving on to this dress by Christina Sigbridsdottir. Let's go through the checkboxes. Now, raw effort, I don't know. Well, just for a dress, I don't know how much effort it took. Technical, again, I don't know. I don't sue that much. Not at all, actually. Aesthetic, that's a question of taste, quite honestly, here. But conceptually, not a lot of people wear this kind of dress in the post-apocalypse. This is not what your typical wasteland girl wears. So assuming that the technical and raw effort parts are good, conceptually this is interesting. Aesthetically, I don't know, it's not personally my taste, but, you know, it is interesting. It is actually more memorable than a lot of average wasteland girl dress, or wasteland boy for that matter, things. So it's not all that bad. It's, there is not a lot finished yet, you know? You just need to do more on this. For some unmemorable costumes, the solution is just do more. Here we have Levi Brace, or Levi Brace. And I saw this on Wasteland Weekend as well. I don't remember it as such, but looking at this, it's not the most boring concept or anything. It has some aesthetics going on to this, not very much raw effort, not very much technical as well. Conceptually, it's kind of interesting, and it's definitely characterized. Like this guy with the, you know, thin guy with the hood, with the ribs and all that. Just replace those ribs with some real metal ribs, mate, and then you're good. In my opinion, because that will just make it technically stand out. Otherwise stand out, anyone can just paint their ribs, you know, on their leather jacket. It can work sometimes, but since you don't have a lot else going on, why not focus on those ribs and just really, really emphasize them and make them out of a material that's technically more difficult, such as metal, that will at the same time be more of an eye-catcher and stand out. That would be just my suggestion. Luciano Maverick, looking like the Argentinian meatloaf thing that is like a bunch of meat held together by a bunch of belts. It's not horrible, but it's also not great. Not a lot more to say about this. A submission by Matt Dillinger. This is literally a potato sack. Okay? That's literally what it is. And as much as it has zero raw effort, zero technical skill, questionable aesthetics, it is conceptually actually not that bad, for the sole reason that how many times have you seen someone running around in a potato sack. Literally. This stands out more than this. Because like, oh, some cool belts and shit and some pants and all that. But dude, my costume is literally a potato sack. Eat shit. So this is cool. I actually like it. Mike Kemling, one of his first costumes, and the photo is by Karen Photo and Film. Yeah, Mike said this left lasting bodily damage. I believe that. But as much as this is not really a finished modern standard work or anything, you see it's a newbie work. But Mike is one of those folks that just can't be boring, that never were boring. Just doing crazy shit that just stands out, is somehow in their blood. I can't explain. Mike and Evan up here, and Alex, Evan most of all, but also Mike. Anyway. You would remember the guy with the huge tire. Remember the linguistic check? Hey, have you seen the guy with the huge tire on his shoulder? Yeah, I have. I remember him. So that's what I have to say about this. Russell Bruce. Russell the Love Muscle. And the photo is by larpimages.com. Now this was an NPC for a LARP, and he was supposed to be blending in and out of background. And this costume does it perfectly. It's a large guy with a large coat and a hat. And you will kind of remember him, but not really, so yeah, mission achieved. And last but not least, here is me on my first Fate LARP. The only thing you would remember is the snail. It's not really visible here in this picture, but the rest was rather forgettable. Now, people remembered me on that LARP because of the way I played, together with my friend Cloud, and that's where we met Joe for the first time. Good times. Anyway, this video was long. I hope it was still worth it to you. And yeah. Go to the Nuclear Snail page, community group. That's the first link in the video description. Since I've used very many reference images in this, which I did not make myself, I'm not calling you out to support me on Patreon and all that. Just this once. You still can, of course. I'm just not actively doing it, which I might be doing by saying that I'm not doing it. Whatever. Anyway, I will see you in the next episode. Love you all, and until next time, hail the snail and have fun crafting.